What is up, all of you awesome and amazing people on YouTube? The Old Coot here, coming at you with another exciting recipe. Yes, today we're making pasta, believe it or not. What I've gotten here is 6 large eggs that I've already beaten, because who wants to sit through a video of watching me beat eggs? Anyways, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. Anyways, what we're going to have is we're going to have 3 different types of flour, and then you do want to have some kind of measuring spoon so that you can measure out your salt, and then also you want a good silicone spatula like this, something similar. I will put links, this is the Dehydrator, I will put all the links to the tools that I'm using down below in the description. There's also, you will need a weight scale. I found that measuring out by cups is kind of a little difficult because different types of flours have different dimensions, right? Like something might be bigger in volume, but not necessarily bigger by weight. So the only accurate way to do this is to weigh everything out. I apologize, but I will put a link to the scale. Also, I'm using a Kitchenaid Mixer, stand mixer. This happens to be the 6-quart size. I will put a link to this down below in the description down there, and also some other variations. If you already have a mixer, maybe you want to do this by hand, right? You could always do everything in a bowl. That's totally fine. But we have technology these days, and I guarantee I want to use it. Okay, so this recipe makes enough for 6. That is 6 servings or 6 people. Basically, the basic formula is for every 1 egg, that's 1 person's portion, but for every 1 egg, you basically want 100 grams total of flour, and then you want, give or take, around a ½ teaspoon of salt. So that's the basic way to remember it is 1 egg, 100 grams, ½ teaspoon of salt, and basically you will have, give or take, the perfect recipe. Okay, so what types of flour are we using? We're going to be using durum semolina, right? Make sure it's a durum semolina flour, has to be that one. You could use either brand. Red Hill supposedly makes better quality products. I had this from another recipe left over, so I'm going to be finishing out this today. But like I said, if you want to go the less expensive route, you could use the Sadaf brand or whatever local brand you have. Bulk sometimes, like here in Southern California, we have Sprouts, we have Whole Foods, we have Bristol Farms. Sometimes buying the semolina in bulk is actually the least expensive route of all. Sometimes you get the same quality. It's all up to you. There's no must-have in this recipe whatsoever. Anyways, you get the idea. So we're going to be using this type of flour. Then what we're going to be using is some whole wheat atta flour. Does it have to be the atta style or the atta brand? No, it could be whatever type of whole wheat flour you want. Basically, what you want is something that has the outer part of the wheat, the germ, the husk, the bran, all that stuff. You just want whole wheat flour. Then you want some kind of all-purpose flour, something that has a nice high protein content to it. I like to use Kyrol, K-Y-R-O-L, because to me that's the perfect amount of protein, right? It's a high protein flour. Anyways, you could also use, I believe, King Midas, right? There's like a few different brands that are out there, a few different types. You know, if all you're left with is general all-purpose flour and that's all you have, that's totally fine. You do not need to mix these if you don't want to, or if these are unavailable to you. If all you have is straight white flour bleached, you could use that too. The way I make it, I think I've got the perfect recipe for chewiness, right? It's got a good bite to it. The pasta comes out al dente almost every single time. And also the flavor profile between the whole wheat, right? And this specific type of whole wheat called atta and the semolina, I think you get a much better flavor out of the pasta, whatever you decide to make, whether you're making spaghetti, linguine, tortellini, you want to roll it out flat, make raviolis, whatever you want to do. This is the basic pasta dough recipe that I've been using for decades, and I love it. Okay, so let's talk about the eggs. So 6 whole eggs. I've already gone ahead and pre-beaten them in my Kitchenaid stand mixer, because who wants to watch me sit here and beat a bunch of eggs? Okay, so that's what she said. Anyways, 6 whole eggs. To that, now I'm going to turn my scale on, right? So I got my digital scale. And what I want to do is I want to add 100 grams of this semolina flour. So the best way to do this is a little bit at a time, so that you don't, you know, put in too much more than you have to. But if you go over by a little bit, it's okay. Just take a little bit off of the other 2 flours. So we're just going to measure out 100 grams here. And I know it's kind of hard to see because of the lights, but... So there's my scale, as you can see. So we're at 33. See, adding. And every once in a while, pause, just to make sure you're not overdoing it. 96. There you go, 103, which is totally fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off 3 grams off of one of the other flours. So now, let's go with the whole wheat atta would be the next one. I want to put in 200 grams of this. So the ratios are 1 part, 2 part, 3 part. So 100 grams, 200 grams, 300 grams, right? 600 grams total, 6 eggs. Remember, 1 egg, 100 grams of total flour, half a teaspoon of salt per person, and you're good to go. So with this one, I'm going to use a smaller little measuring cup, and I'm actually going to do this with intention so that I don't overdo it. But what I want to try to do is I want to tear off my scale, so it goes back to 0. So we're back to 0. And now what I want to do is I want to add and make sure I only add 200 grams. So let's see. There's in the 50s. We're getting close. Right there is a little over 100, right? 122. Now I'm going to add a little bit more. We're getting even closer. So remember, I'm aiming for 197 because I put in 3 extra grams of the other one. So as long as I get to about 197, I'll be good to go. Is that 197 per? Oh my God, on the money. Look at that. The hand that should be playing the lotto. Anyways, so there's my, right, 103 plus 197. I've got my 300 there. So now I'm going to tear off the scale gun. So now what I want to do is I want to go to my high protein flour, right? Which is, like I said, you can use whatever brand you want as long as it's a high protein flour. But if this was all you had, that's totally fine. And to answer a quick question for you, can you only use whole wheat flour? You could, but the noodles are going to break apart faster because there's nothing to hold them together. Like, I know that sounds strange and weird. You're like, well, flour is flour. It's really, there's really a difference. You cannot use 100% whole wheat flour because it just doesn't come out the same way. The dough, it gets really sticky and it comes apart and it doesn't mix well. And when you boil your dough, right, your pasta, it just falls apart and it disintegrates and it's a big mess. What you could do, if you wanted to leave out the semolina, what you could do is do like 2 parts heavy or high protein flour with 1 part whole wheat. So in that case, what you would do is you would do like 400 grams of your high protein flour and then 200 grams of your whole wheat. Does that make sense? And if you wanted to cut the recipe in half, let's say you're only cooking for 3 people, what you could do is 200 grams of this flour, 100 grams of this flour, you'd be set. And like I said earlier on in the video, if you only have all-purpose flour, bleached, white, just regular, that's totally fine. For this recipe, you would use 600 grams of that, right? If that's all you're using, you're not using the other 2 flours. But in my case, going back to this video, we need 300 grams of this. So I'm going to measure out 300 grams of my high protein flour, right? My scale is torn. I tore it off back to 0. So let me go ahead and add this until we hit 300. I know more or less it's about 2 scoops or so. 2 scoops in every bowl of pasta. Okay, so here's 200 and change. 249. Let's see if I can get, all I want is just 50 grams of flour now, give or take. A little bit less. And always remember, whenever you pour in, it's a good idea to just wait a second. Let the scale catch up, right? Because sometimes your hand is faster than the scale. Slide a hand there. Anyways, so I wanted to try to get to 300. Just got a little bit more. 298. 2 grams isn't going to hurt you. There you go. Boom, 300. Okay, so if you do go over, it's totally fine. What you can do is just reach in there and take a pinch out and just keep reducing until you get to your desired amount. But anyways, this is basically what you've got going on here in terms of the flour and the egg ratio. Now what you want to do is you want to measure out your salt. So remember, half a teaspoon of salt for every 100 grams of flour and the 1 egg. And the reason why it sounds like a lot of salt, but the reason why you want more salt is because this pasta, when you boil it out, is not going to be sitting in the boiling water that's salted, right, for as long as if the pasta was completely dried out. So because of that, you can put a little more salt in to give you more flavor. And also having that little bit of extra salt in there means that you don't have to add salt at the end. Who likes putting table salt on their finished pasta? It's not a good concept or whatever. Anyways, and give it a try. You know, if it's too much salt for you and you want to back off a little, totally fine. If you want to try to make the recipe with like maybe a 1/4 teaspoon of salt per person, try that. Maybe that's good enough for you. Maybe you don't like things as salty as, you know, other people do or whatever. You can always do that. Can you leave the salt out entirely? That's a yes and no kind of a situation. The salt helps act as a binding agent as well as the eggs, which helps hold everything together. So if you completely remove the salt from the recipe, you're going to get that kind of like falling apart kind of noodle pasta kind of thing. So if you're making shorter pastas, like if you're making little, you know, whatever the style would be, the shorter types or whatever, you might be able to get away with it, but you're going to have clumps instead of like pasta. Anyways, with that being said, I've got my handy dandy measuring spoons here. So what I want to do is I want to do 1/2 teaspoon, which is going to be this size, right? Take notice, 1/2 teaspoon. So what I want is I want 1/2 teaspoon per every 100 grams. Basically comes out to around 3 teaspoons total. So you could either do 6 of these, you can measure them out, or you could just measure out 3 teaspoons, right? I like to go the faster route, so I'm just going to go 3 teaspoons. What I've got here is some Himalayan pink. And you just want a nice, level teaspoon, right? So as you put your teaspoons in, just make sure they're level. And try to distribute this, right? Because you want to make sure you get even distribution there. So there's 1, this is going to be 2, right? And then here's going to be 3, right? So 6 half teaspoons equals 3 teaspoons. Does that make sense? And like I said, if you're doing this, if you want to cut the recipe in half, just use 1.5 teaspoons, right, for 3 people or 3 portion sizes or whatever. But I like to make enough for 6 because you're going to have company over. People are going to want to try your pasta, right? They're going to think it's delicious. The greatest gift to Earth since the wheel or since the invention of pasta. Anyways, you get the idea. Okay, so with that being said, now we do need a little bit of moisture in here. In terms of water, so just regular water. So what I like to do is I like to break out the tablespoon, and the way this works is the formula is kind of odd because it's an as needed basis. But usually I find that making 6 portions, you need give or take around 2 tablespoons of water. So any water will do. You could use water straight out of the sink, which is what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and measure out. There's 1 tablespoon. Going over to my party. There you go. And then here's going to be 2 tablespoons. And then you may find out that you're going to need or not need to add more water. If you do need to add more water, just add 1/2 teaspoon at a time from this point forward. And I will, as we start blending this, I will show you all what to look for and how to spot that and all that good stuff. Sorry. So basically the recipe's here. So to recap, it's 6 whole eggs that we've already pre-beaten. You just want to make sure they're blended and beaten. Maybe 2 minutes inside, like either beat them by hand or with a whisk or whatever you want to use. Then you've got 600 total grams of flour, right, in a 1-2-3 ratio. Pasta is easy as 1-2-3, right? 1 part semolina, 2 parts whole wheat, 3 parts high protein flour. Then what I've got is the salt. Remember, it's 1/2 teaspoon of salt per portion, right? So since you have, so remember, 1/2 teaspoon of salt per portion. So since you have 6 portions, you're going to have 6 1/2 teaspoons. When you multiply across divide, subsection, conjunction, junction, what's your function? That basically equals 3 teaspoons, 3 teaspoons of salt. Remember, we're doing this by weight, not by volume or, you know what I'm saying? So if you don't want to use the Red Sea salt, if you want to use kosher salt, that's totally fine. But if you're going to use kosher salt, you have to remember that kosher salt has more volume. So you're going to have to figure out what those ratios are of kosher salt to regular salt. I believe it's something like 1.5 to 1 or something similar. Anyways, I'll let you do that math and figure that out on your own. The best way to do it is use either regular table salt or sea salt or Celtic sea salt, just some kind of salt that's other than kosher. But if you do want to use kosher, I'll let you figure out the math yourself. Anyways, here we go. So here goes my bowl. right? We're gonna put this in our Kitchenaid mixer, snap this down. Okay, now what type of attachment to use? I like this one. I don't know what the heck this thing is called. It's not the paddle. I think it's just the regular mixer one. But anyways, you get the idea. It's the one that looks like a leaf, right? So as you're looking at it, it looks like a leaf. All we're trying to do is just blend up the mixture so that it turns into like clumpy balls, basically, is what we're basically trying to aim for. Once you get that, you can shut off your mixer, and then you're gonna have to finish it out by hand on your countertop. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this attachment on, but I'm not gonna turn the machine on right away because I like to work with clean surfaces. So I wanna make sure I clean up my area before I start doing this, because time will be of the essence, right? You don't wanna overwork your mixer. But basically, let me go ahead and get the attachment on. So let's see. Okay, so attachment's on there, right? I'm gonna raise up my bowl. Raise your glass, raise your bowl. Machine is still off, as you notice. Now it's time to clean up the area. So I just want to make sure I have enough room to work and move around in. And when I bring out the dough's going to be a big clumpy ball. It's going to be about this big, right? So I just want to make sure I clean off some of this area here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start moving stuff around. Get this out of the way, right? Very, very important part of the whole process is make sure you're constantly... Like, I clean as I go is basically the best way to describe it. Leave these handy because you may need to add more water. Remember, you may need to add another teaspoon as you go if the dough is getting too dry. Here is my semolina that I'm going to put out of the way. Right? Keep a spatula on hand to scoop down the sides of the bowl and scrape out the bowl when you're done. I'm going to clean up this. And basically, I'm going to double up my boards over here. Move. This is your cover or your shield. I find that doing the mix this way, I really don't need this. For the purposes of the video, I'll just put it on there anyway so you can see. But you really shouldn't have or get any kind of like huge poof ball of flour going everywhere, because your flour is marinating with those eggs right now. So it's already kind of just through process of osmosis, the eggs are absorbing into the flour regardless. So you're good there. If you noticed, no olive oil. I have not put olive oil in here yet. I may not need to. The reason why you would want to add olive oil here would be basically to help to prevent the sticking to the sides of the bowl. We'll see how the mix goes. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. But if you do, it's going to be very minimal. It's going to be like maybe like a half a teaspoon of olive oil if you need to put it in there. But what I noticed was you want the eggs to have a chance to bind with the flour directly so that you're hydrating the flour. If you put oil in there at this point or now before you even start mixing, what you're going to end up doing is the oil is going to block the egg from absorbing into the flour completely. So yes, it will happen eventually, but it's a better technique to just let this mix first, and then if you have to add oil at the very, very end just to separate everything out, that's totally fine. Okay, so back to my surface, right, my work surface. I've got my handy dandy kitchen towel, right? Or you could use paper towels, whatever floats your boat, but you just want to kind of give your area, hopefully you have a clean countertop. You could also do this on a wooden board. I did a review a little while back for Virginia Boys Kitchens, their carving boards. Just flip it over and you could use that as a work surface. Actually, when we roll out the dough in probably video part 2, because this one's getting way too long, you could do something like that, or you could use a wood carving board, whatever you want to use, or if you don't want to use your actual countertop. But this is the way I do it. I like this because it's a stone-based material. Stays a little bit cooler, which helps keep everything together. Anyways, you get the idea. So we're going to go ahead and turn on our mixer now. And basically, I'm just going to speed number 1, right? Just letting it mix away. And it's a slow, tedious process, but just let it do its thing. And eventually, what you'll start seeing, like, I don't even need this because I already know. But I'm taking it off just so you can see clearly. But if you want to put it on, if you have like fumbly fingers and you're accidentally afraid that you might set your speed to level 2 or 3 by accident, by all means, go ahead and put this on your mixer. But at level 1, you know, you're good to go. Anyways, what you're really looking for here is you just want to see everything come together, and this happens pretty quickly. So, and listen to the motor. Hear how hear how the motor's starting to strain a little bit? So this would be a good time to shut it off. And all I want to do now is I want to lower the bowl. And here's where your silicone spatula comes in handy. This is where I want to scrape down the paddle attachment or whatever this is, the mixer attachment. I just want to scrape all this out and down so that some of this unincorporated flour has a chance to mix in there, right? Let the machine do the work, but at the same time, make it as easy as possible for the machine to do the work. Does that make sense? So come back in here now, trying to get the other side, right? And we've got a little bit of clumpiness, which is totally fine. And like I said, if you want to do this by hand, you don't even want to use the machine at all, that's totally fine. Like if you're sitting there going like, well, I'm going to have to use my hands anyway, I might as well just all do it by hand. Totally, completely fine. You can do the well method, right? You make a circle of flour and then make a well in the middle and then basically put your eggs in there, mix up your eggs and just keep incorporating in as you go. You could totally do it that way. That's totally fine. I just like doing it this way. This is the way I've been doing it. So with that being said, let me go ahead and scrape this down. Right, and it may be tempting to eat this dough, but please don't do that because you've got eggs in here, raw eggs, so make sure that you're not eating your dough as you go. Okay, so bowl comes back up, right? I'm lifting up my bowl again, and there we go. And basically, I want to turn my machine back on. Number one, remember, just the first speed setting, as you can see right there, just level 1. And this is going to come together pretty quickly. Maybe just a touch more. And that's it. Okay. What I'm listening for is the motor sounds like it's straining to keep turning even at level speed 1. The mistake most people make is they go to speed level 2 and they tend to ruin because then what happens is the mixer starts mixing too fast and then you're not really mixing anymore, you're just scattering. So with that being said, we are done with this mixer. I'm going to go ahead and lower the bowl. I'm going to take out my paddle attachment. I'm going to remove my bowl. Right, and we're back here. So this is what you're looking for, right? You're basically looking for something like this. Now what I want to do is I just want to remove everything out of the bowl. The best way I found to do this is get yourself a kitchen towel, right? Fold it up into about quarters. Put your bowl onto the kitchen towel. Let me clear out some more workspace here. Now what I want to do is take out the mixer attachment and using my silicone spatula again. I mean, you can use your fingers, you know, it's totally fine. Like if you want to get in there, because you're going to be getting in there anyways, like down and dirty with it. But I find that if I just use the spatula, kind of helps with separation and getting, you know, all of this pasta goodness. At this point, we're in like almost a dough. Actually, it is doughy, but yeah, I guess you could call this pasta dough at this point. It's kind of crumbly. It's kind of crumbly dough. It's like crumbled feta at this point, basically. That's what it is. Okay, anyways, mix-ins. Okay, that's another question. People want to know, like, okay, well, what if I want to make like a spinach pasta dough, or I want to make like a sepia, which is black ink pasta, right, from the squid or the sepia or the cuttlefish. You could do that too. What I would do is I would put it in at the beginning when you first started mixing. That's when you would want to put it in there. There's no reason to add in stuff after, you know, after we've gotten to this point, because at this point you're basically mixed. What you're trying to do now is you're trying to consolidate. Okay, so that's a pretty clean paddle, and this is another sign that you've got the right amount of flour to salt to egg to that little bit of water in there. If this was sticking, like if I had a little bit of stickage here, that would be a situation where then you could add some really good quality olive oil at about 1/4 teaspoon at a time. So if I wanted to add olive oil, it would be solely because the dough is sticking to the mixer attachment, right? We are going to add a touch of olive oil after we've mixed everything up, or we've gotten it out onto the countertop, I should say. But I find that I really don't need this. Like, I really don't need olive oil. If you want to just, you know, go with the agenda and add olive oil, you could. I really don't, because I really don't feel like I need it. Okay, so anyways, paddle attachment comes out. Now I've got my bowl. So basically what I want to do is I just want to do like a little bit of a pre-scrape and a pre-shape. So look at how beautiful this all came together. There's very little unmixed flour in there, right? Which is if you ask me, this is the perfect consistency. Now I just need to blend that bottom part with the top part. So as much as you can get everything kind of sort of mixed in the bowl before you take it out, the better. But see how I've got a little bit of stickage here, which is totally fine. That's like a dry stick, not a wet stickage, if you ask me. So what you're basically trying to do here is you're just trying to like pre-form the ball, but also, like I said, make sure that there's no loose flour in there. So I feel like we're there. Okay, why the kitchen towel? So the bottom of your bowl doesn't scrape your countertop, right? That's why we use the kitchen towel. These are all restaurant tricks and secrets I'm teaching you after, let's just say I worked in the restaurant biz. We'll just leave it at that. Okay, so here we go. So here's the rest of my dough. Here's my spatula. Another good sign that you've got the right mix and the right ratio and that everything's good is your spatula is clean. See how clean that spatula is? I mean, there's little specks here and there, but you know what I'm saying? There's no heavy residue on the silicone spatula, right? Everything has come off cleanly. So it's better to err on the side of being dry. You can always add water versus being too wet. And then now you're in a messy and sticky situation where you have to start adding olive oil or you have to start adding more flour. It turns into a big mess. So always err on the side of being more dry. Like if you are, by the way, big tip I forgot to mention was, if you are going to use only the high protein flour, right? This is my high protein flour. Let's say you were only going to use the high protein flour. Try the recipe first with only 1 tablespoon of water. The reason why I feel like this recipe calls for the 2 tablespoons of water is because you've got your semolina flour in there, which does absorb a lot of water. So that's why. So if you're gonna, so to recap, and I may have made a mistake in saying this, but to recap, if you're only gonna use like all-purpose flour or only gonna use high protein flour without the wheat and without the semolina, try the recipe with 1 tablespoon of water. If you feel like you're too dry and you've got too much like sand-looking flour at the bottom, after you've done this process of mixing it with the rubber spatula or the silicone spatula, then go ahead and add just a half a teaspoon or a half a teaspoon of water at a time to make sure that dried out flour that hasn't incorporated, make sure that has a chance to incorporate. Does that all make sense? I hope so. Okay, this is taking way too long than it should, but basically you get the idea. So now is when it's time to get down and dirty. What I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to squeeze the ball, right, to make sure I get some consolidation. Move my kitchen towel kind of out of the way. Just basically using the edge of that towel right there so I don't damage my countertop. What I want to do is I just want to pull the ball out of dough. There you go. And here's what I'm talking about. So we have just a little bit of granular flour here that when you put it in your hand, here's another good test to know how much water you've got, if you've got enough moisture in there, and etc. So right now it just looks like scattered flour, but if you gather all this up into a ball, right, and squeeze it in your hand, if it forms a ball, right, then you know you've got the right amount of moisture. So I do not need to add any more moisture to this, no more water. It's okay if you get a little bit like that, that's totally fine. But if like half the bowl is like flour, then you're in trouble. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I want to get all of this goodness out. This is something where you could use your spatula if you needed to, but I feel like just using your hands is good enough. Okay, so this is pretty much what the bottom of your bowl, let me just get that last little bit out. Okay, so this is pretty much what the bottom of your bowl should look like when your dough comes out. Does that make sense? So look for that. That's basically what you're looking for at the bottom of your bowl when you pull your dough out. If it's dried up on all sides, there's not too much stickiness, then you know you've done it right. So this goes in the sink with some water. I'll do that later or next. What I want to do here is I just want to tighten this up for about 30 seconds to a minute, just to get it into a nice, more solid, defined ball shape. And then we're going to let this sit and rest for 30 minutes to an hour. An hour is ideal. That basically gives the dough a chance to relax, quote unquote, to relax. But also it gives the eggs and the flour a chance to mix together. Basically, again, you're hydrating your flour. You're making sure you've got a good homogeneous feel to your dough so that everything is mixed together. So just down and dirty, basically press, right? And just keep rolling back over. So I'm with my hands, what I'm feeling for is I'm feeling wet spots, moist spots. I'm feeling some dry spots. I just want to make sure that everything is getting mixed to a homogeneous state. And this is where you earn, this is where you earn your pasta, because this is where the work comes in. And sorry about the shakiness. The camera's on what's called a Snorri cam, which is a type of system. I'll try to put a link down below to the camera system that I'm using. But basically, it's like you wear it around your neck, and your cell phone goes in there, or your camera, or whatever. So now we've got a more defined ball, as you can see. And a little bit of fringe, like a little bit of this is totally fine. That's totally normal. Just make sure to wipe your hands. Make sure you started with clean hands. I hope we all did, right? Before you started mixing, because whatever was on your hands, guess what? That's going into your dough. So if your hands are clean, your dough's clean, and you know you're good to go. Okay, so get this on, give it a good press, and a little press. So see now how... So take a look here. I'll pause for a second just so you can all see. See now how my dough is becoming, it's looking more like a ball of dough. It's getting more homogeneous. There's less clumping going on. There's just a little bit of fringe clumping, which is totally fine. But see how much more in unison the dough is, right? And look at that beautiful color. That's a nice, like light brown color. And the semolina helps with that coloration. And also the whole wheat flour helps with that coloration. If you have straight white pasta, it's because you're probably using bleached all-purpose flour. Like I said, it's totally fine, but aesthetically, you want your pasta to look as appealing as it tastes, because we eat first with our eyes and then we taste with our mouths. So if you use the semolina, you get that nice yellow color. What you could do is, like I said, the variations for pasta are amazing. You could use the cuttlefish ink, the squid ink. You could use some dried tomato paste. You could use sun-dried tomatoes that you would mix in there. That's a whole nother video for a whole nother day, because some of your water ratios will change. Like instead of using 2 tablespoons of water, you could use 2.5 to 3 tablespoons of tomato, like sun-dried tomato paste, and to compensate for the water, right? You're adding tomato paste and sun-dried tomatoes. You get the idea. But anyways, that'll be a whole nother video for a whole nother day. Green, you could do basil pasta. You could do spinach pasta. We'll get into that in other videos. This is just the basic foundation core recipe. So as this is hydrating more, right, I feel like I'm getting a more homogeneous dough. And when it feels like it's getting a little too firm to push into, that's when you know it's time to stop. But what I'm feeling for here, I guess the best way to describe this is, I forgot what they're called, but somewhere in the Midwest, I believe there's a delicious delicacy where it's peanut butter mixed with like brown sugar, and then you coat them in chocolate, right? I forgot what they're called, but that's what this feels like. This feels like peanut butter mixed with brown sugar. That's the kind of like resistance, and push you should be having, right? As you're pushing and pressing this. So let me just give this a little more squeezing, making sure we've got a nice good compact ball here, right? And wait, okay, there we go. We're almost there. Okay, and now I feel like we have it. So let me go ahead and see if I can reduce some of this camera shake. So now I feel like we have it. There's our perfect ball. And your ball should be about the size of like a massive grapefruit, right? Maybe just a little bit bigger than a softball. But that's about the size that your ball should be. It should be somewhere like a huge grapefruit, or the size of like something a little bit bigger than like a softball. So this is pretty much ready for sitting or resting. What I'm going to do is just leave it like this. And then now, now that it's had a chance to hydrate, now what you can do is you can add a little bit of olive oil, right? Just a teaspoon or so, and then cover it with some kind of plastic wrap or saran wrap. Do not use tin foil to cover this. Just use plastic wrap. You could use a Ziploc bag. Like, I wouldn't put it in the bag because then you're going to deal with stickers later on. But what I would do is just like a little bit of olive oil. So here's my olive oil. I'm just going to put about like a half a teaspoon on, not even like a 1/4 teaspoon on, just massage that all in, right? And just cover it. Make sure you cover this. I left my saran wrap in the other room, but I don't want to run over there and run all the way back. But anyways, you get the idea. But anyways, cover this up. Put either a plastic bag over it or saran wrap or whatever. Let it sit for about half an hour to an hour. So stay tuned for part 2 of this video when we actually roll out the dough. So stay tuned for that. And I'll be back in about an hour or so to show you all what that looks like. Anyways, if you like what you're seeing, I know this video is a little bit longer than it had to be. Go ahead and hit the like button down there below. Give me a big thumbs up. Also hit the subscribe button if you like what you're seeing. I did put links to all the products that I used today down below in the description section, so make sure to check that out. It's under the kitchen, right? The quote-unquote kitchen section. So make sure to check that out. There's also some other products down there if you want to check those out. I'm the Old Coot, and I'll be back at you in an hour with part 2 of this video where we actually roll out the dough.